I also have a property for sale for just over $3 million. But it's not one house. It's 10 houses.
Oh.
So it is a portfolio of homes. It is an investment portfolio for an investor. We put this out on the market, and when you do that, some interesting things happen. You have to pick a picture to use for that. And if you have 10 homes that are for sale, and you pick a picture of one of the homes, it looks like that thing is very overpriced for $3.5 million. But then when you look at the comments and you dig into it, you're like, oh, so this is a portfolio sale. And what is a portfolio sale? And what are some of the things we have to think about when we start looking at selling something like that? And the other question is, why is the seller selling it like that? So number one, you have to look at sellers' goals and what they're trying to accomplish. So if you look at, there are some advantages of if you sell your entire portfolio at once. Obviously, timing. You are able to deal with one buyer versus dealing with 10 different buyers on 10 separate houses. Also, a lot of these houses, since it's an investment portfolio, they have tenants in the house. And so if you're looking at an investor who's willing to buy all of them as a package, you're not having to constantly, through a long period of time, maybe different months, you're not having to disturb the tenants multiple times. You're also not having to worry about when you can do a retail sale with this house because there's a lease in place. And the leases on 10 different properties, they all expire at different months. So the problem is if you wait until you're at the expiration of all the leases, you might have a property that goes vacant in July.
Yeah, because they all don't go vacant at the same time. So you're going to have vacant, and then finally.
Exactly. And so that negatively affects cash flow and then takes away from the property value. And so what a lot of investors will do is they'll come to us and they'll be like, hey, Lance, can we package this up as a single portfolio and then sell it to an investor? These particular properties, all in West Pasco, great portfolio. And they range anywhere from, we've got 3-bed, 2-bath ramblers at, roughly 1,400 square feet, all the way up to 2,100 square feet properties. And rents range anywhere from $1,495 a month to $1,995 a month. And so even if we had two investors, we can take a portfolio like this and somebody could purchase properties with tenants in place, with rent and cash flow. And we also have, since we've been managing them, we have all of the inspection photographs of all the properties. So we could say we could chunk off 3 of these properties for an investor. We could do 2 different portions of this, 5 homes to one, 5 to another, and put together a deal. Now, here's the thing about what's the flip side of this, Lance? What does that look like? Well, the flip side of that for the seller is that there are less buyers available. So the seller has those advantages we talked about, getting rid of it in one transaction or 2 transactions versus spreading this out over 12 to 16 months, depending upon when leases.
Okay.
Well, to have some of those advantages, the seller is going to have to price the portfolio at a discount when they put it all together. So when you look at this, for instance, we've got 10 homes spread out across West Pasco, and the purchase price of that portfolio is $3.6 million, $3.685. So that's an average for each of those homes of roughly $368,000.
Okay.
These homes, these are not $368,000. When I tell you that, people are like, oh my gosh, there's tons of I would love to find a home in West Pasco in decent shape like these properties for $368,000. So what the investor has done is they're like, okay, if somebody's willing to make this in one or two transactions and accept the leases that are in place with the tenants, then we're going to be able to give that investor a discount. And you see that a lot in this situation. A new buyer of a portfolio, they are not going to want to inherit pissed off tenants, or tenants that have had problems. And so as a management company, one of the keys that we have is that we have a lot of information and documentation from inspections. So we have inspection photos, we have the information about the property's history, we have the finance information that goes along with when payments have been made and what the cash flow looks like, and also any major repairs that have been done. So when we go to package up one of these portfolios, it's not always necessary that that type of buyer tours the home before they make an offer. And so one of the things that does is that also makes for happier tenants, because one of the things that we will make as a consideration that you have to have is we will tell people that you have to have pre-approved funds and funding for the purchase, and then we have to have an accepted offer before you tour the properties. Okay, now to a common buyer out there that's not an investor, the first time you tell them this, they think it's absolutely insane. They're like, what do you mean I'm not going to tour the asset that I'm purchasing, or I'm not going to tour the property that I'm purchasing? Well, that's exactly what I mean. But I'm going to put a contingency in there that says, based upon that tour, if it's not what you expected or were thinking, you can just back out based upon that tour. And so a lot of times people will be like, well, man, that's a lot of work to go through. Well, it's not as much as you think. Like if you are looking to buy an investment, if you're in that realm, you are generally working with investors or lenders that are willing to give you a pre-approval letter, that know your finances, that have looked at what you're trying to do. So most people actually already have that information ready to go before we go look. The second thing about it, too, is the more you're around property and involved with contingencies and investment property, it's very, very common to have a feasibility study to review leases, review finance records, and to make offers contingent upon viewing interiors of properties. And so once you get used to that and do that a couple of times, it's not near as a big of a deal as you think it is. It's just if you've never bought like that before, it can seem odd. A lot of times, too, though, I will tell people, sometimes the best deals for buyers, if you kind of switch your mindset there a little bit, sometimes the best deals for buyers are those ones because other people have passed because of that. So like where if it's a great deal and the numbers are working, there might be another buyer that thinks just like you, well, gosh, I'm not going to go through the hour and a half it takes to do all the paperwork and figure it out. So I'm going to pass and go on to the next property. You might have less competition in that realm. And so those, if you're willing to do that hour and a half of work and paperwork, and you look at those that are contingent upon viewing, a lot of times you might be the first or second person that gets an offer in there that's willing to go through that. And so there can be deals in that situation, kind of like we talked about before the break. The pricing of this portfolio are below market deals for those West Pasco homes if you're willing to go through and look at the work it takes to put an offer in and get that put together. The other thing that we look at in that situation is, what do the financials look like? If you're an investor looking at a portfolio of homes like that, you do want to pay attention to, have there been any major repairs that we've had to make to the house in the last 2 to 3 years? What do the HVAC systems look like? How much do I have to have in reserve to plan for some of those repairs that are coming up? So you want to know what that looks like. You also want to know what the rental history of the current tenants look like. Are these properties that have been tenanted and had people in it for 3 to 4 years with no vacancies, or are they properties that have been turning over a lot and then have some vacancies? So you'll want to look at those financial records and see, what does the rental history look like? The other thing that you want to do is try to look and see, is there value in this portfolio to potentially increase rents? Now, we talked a few shows back about rental, rent caps and
rent control in Washington.
But if you look at a portfolio like this, for instance, is there a chance to raise those 7, 8, 9%, stay within that rental cap, and then increase the worth of the portfolio? So really looking at those financial considerations when looking at these portfolios are a big deal for sure. And then the negotiation strategy. Of course, the more problems you're willing to solve for the seller, the better potential deal you're likely to get. So are you willing to take on some of the risk of the longer term leases, of the rent control? Are you able to take on that risk? And if you are, you're probably likely going to be able to get a better deal in that situation. And then as I wrap up and kind of talk about this, and I know this sounds funny to talk about in the capacity of portfolio sales, but I find even investors and landlords, they have a tendency still, because we're human, right? They have a tendency still to have some emotional attachments to their portfolios. Usually these are good performing portfolios that have cash flowed for them well over the years. And yes, they are going to get a big chunk of money when that portfolio sells. But a lot of times, they'll say to me, man, I oversaw the remodel of that unit 2 years ago, and that one's always been my favorite. Like, that one's had the same tenant in it for 8 years, and they're awesome, and they pay on time, and we've become friends now. And so our job, as a real estate professional and property manager, is to help them remove some of that emotional attachment and look at the portfolio. What's it going to take to get an offer? Get the deal to the finish line for you, and then get you that check that you can move to that next investment. So those are the biggest considerations that we're looking at with these portfolio sales. They're super fun to work on. I also, definitely challenge investors out there. If you're looking at a portfolio that has 10 properties in it, don't be afraid to go to that investor. And if that's too big of a chunk for you to handle, don't be afraid to go to that investor, go to your agent, contact kenmoreteam.com and say, you know what, I don't want 10 of those houses, but I think that I can take 3. Because we likely have investors that can then take the other portion. So if you're like, man, let's make an offer to take 3 of those houses or 4 of those houses. I'm more comfortable with that. And I've got some 1031 exchange money from another investment I've sold. And this would allow me to identify 3 or 4 that I can take down and put that 1031 exchange money to work. So there are a lot of options when you're looking at something like that. Like I say, we would love to talk to you guys about that. If you've considered putting a portfolio like this together to sell, at the same time, we can give you good advice to help you navigate that process. Go to kenmoreteam.com, shoot us a message. Enjoy Chick-fil-A out there. We eventually, I'm sure, will have almost everybody in the Tri-Cities there. If you don't want the traffic, just wait a few weeks. And at least we will get a little bit less congested. But have a great weekend. We'll be right back here next week talking real estate.